change of population. The centuries 700 to 400 BCE saw continued development of contact with continental Europe, yet the greater availability of iron facilitated land clearance and thus the growth of population. The earliest ironsmiths made daggers of the halstop type, but of a distinctly British form. The settlements were also of a distinctly British type, with the traditional roundhouse, the Celtic system of farming with its small fields and storage pits for grain.
Go on.
The century following 600 BCE saw the building of many large hill forts. These suggest the existence of powerful chieftains and the growth of strife as increasing population created pressures on the land. By 300 BCE, swords were making their appearance once more in place of daggers. Finally, beginning in the 3rd century, a British form of Latine Celtic art was developed to decorate warlike equipment such as scabbards, shields, and helmets, and eventually also bronze mirrors and even domestic pottery. During the 2nd century, the export of Cornish tin, noted before 300 by Pytheas of Massilia, a Greek explorer, continued. Evidence of its destination is provided by the Paul Cornwall hoard of North Italian silver coins. In the 1st century BCE, this trade was in the hands of the Veneti of Brittany. Their conquest, 56 BCE, by Julius Caesar, who destroyed their fleet, seems to have put an end to it.
Really interesting. Okay, finish up the next paragraph, Kathy, if you don't mind.
Okay. By 200, Britain had fully developed its insular Celtic character. The emergence, however, of the British tribes known to Roman historians was due to limited settlement by tribesmen from Belgic Gaul. Coin finds suggest that southeast Britain was socially and economically bound to Belgic Gaul.
Now, Belgic Gaul, and what is Gaul? Remember when if you read Caesar, he said Gaul is part of it trace parts, 3 parts. Basically, Gaul is France. France, the town of Belgium, France, that area was Gaul. Okay, and of course, Julius Caesar conquered that part of the world, and managed to insert Roman culture. Go ahead, please.
The result was a distinctive culture in southeast Britain, especially in Kent and north of the Thames, which represented a later phase of the continental Celtic Latine culture. Its people used coins and the potter's wheel and cremated their dead, and their better equipment enabled them to begin the exploitation of heavier soils for agriculture.
Okay, I think probably next week we're going to actually have some pictures of the Latine culture of the Celts. The first few classes are going to be on Britain and the Roman era. It's very, very important for history. Okay? Cursor down if you'd be so kind. Now let's go down to Rome. Ray, would you pick up there, please?
Julius Caesar conquered Gaul between 58 and 50 BCE and invaded Britain in 55 or 54 BCE, thereby bringing the island into close contact with the Roman world. Caesar's description of Britain at the time of his inventions in the first coherent account extant from about 20 BCE, it is possible to distinguish 2 principal powers.
Let's say Catugalani. I don't know.
The Catugalani north of the Thames, led by Tatiovanus, successor of Caesar's adversary Cassivellaunus, and south of the river. The kingdom of the Atrebates, ruled by Commius and his son, Commius, Epilius, and Verica.
You're very good. You're very right.
Got all those names.
He's pretty names are crazy. Go ahead.
Succeeded in about 5 CE by his son, established power all over the southeast, which he ruled from
Colchester. Just Colchester.
Beyond these kingdoms lay the isolated in what is now Norfolk, the Coral Tavy in the Midlands, the Daubini in the area of Gloucestershire,
They're just called Gloucester. Gloucester. Pronounced Gloucester.
And the Doro tribes in that of Dorset, all of whom issued coins and probably had Belgic rulers. Behind this, again, lay further independent tribes. The Dunoni of Devon, the Brigantes in the north, and the Sirius and Ordovices in Wales. The Belgic and semi-Belgic tribes later formed the civilized nucleus of the Roman province and thus contributed greatly to Roman Britain.
What amazed me about that paragraph is that even around before Christ, and by the way, the BCE is a liberal term. It used to be AD, Anno Domini, and BC before Christ. Now they call it BCE, before Christian era, which I've never liked that. But anyway, the fact that they had coins back then, isn't that impressive? I mean, they had commerce and money and all that, Okay. Let's cursor down, and Kathy, you want to pick up with that?
The client relationships that Caesar had established with certain British tribes were extended by Augustus. In particular, the Atrebatic kings welcomed Roman aid in their resistance to the Catubilian expansion. The decision of the Emperor Claudius to conquer the island was a result partly of his personal ambition, partly of British aggression. Arica had been driven from his kingdom and appealed for help, and it may have been calculated that a hostile Catubilian supremacy would endanger stability across the channel. Under Aulus Plautius, an army of 4 regions were assembled, together with a number of auxiliary regiments, consisting of cavalry and infantry raised among warlike tribes subject to the empire. After delay caused by the troops' unwillingness to cross the ocean, which they then regarded as the boundary of the human world, a landing was made at Richborough, Kent, in 43 CE. The British under Togodumnus and Caratacus sons and successors of Canubilianus were taken by surprise and defeated. They were retired to defend the Medway crossing near Rochester, but were again defeated in a hard battle. The way to Camalodunum lay open, but
Camalodunum. I think it's Camalodunum. Camalodunum. Hard to say. Doesn't matter.
Plautius halted at the Thames to await the arrival of the emperor, who took personal command of the closing stages of the campaign. In one short season, the main military opposition had been crushed. Togodumnus was dead, and Caratacus had fled to Wales. The rest of Britain was by no means united, for Belgic expansion had created tensions. Some tribes submitted, and subduing the rest remained the task for the year 44. For this purpose, smaller expeditionary forces were formed, consisting of single legions or parts of legions with their auxilia, subsidiary allied troops. The best documented campaign is that of Legion II under its legate, Vespasian, starting from the Chichester, where the Atrebatic kingdom was restored. The Isle of Wight was taken and the hill forts of Dorset reduced. Legion 9 advanced advanced into Lincolnshire, and Legion 14 probably across the Midlands toward
Leicester.
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 Okay,
Perhaps Leicester, yeah.
Colchester was the chief base, but the fortress of individual legions at this stage have not yet been identified.
Okay, Ray, you want to pick up?
Okay. By the year 47, when Plautius was succeeded as commanding officer by Ostorius Capula, a frontier had been established from Exeter to the Humber, based on the road known as the Fosse Way. From this fact, it appears that Claudius did not plan the annexation of the whole island, but only of the arable southeast. The intransigence of the tribes of Wales, spurred on by Caratacus, however, caused Scapula to occupy the lowlands beyond the Fosse Way up to the river Severn, and to move forward his forces into this area for the struggle with the Silurius and Ordovices. The Roman forces were strengthened by the addition of Legion 20, released for this purpose by the foundation of a veteran settlement, Colonia, at Camulodunum in the year 49. The Colonia would form a strategic reserve, as well as setting the Britons an example of Roman urban organization and life. A provincial center for the worship of the emperor was also established. Scopula's flank was secured by the treaty relationship that had been established with Cartimandua, queen of the Brigantes. Hers was the largest kingdom in Britain, occupying the whole area between Derbyshire and the Tyne. Unfortunately, it lacked stability, nor was it united behind its queen, who lost popularity when she surrendered the British resistance leader, Caratacus, to the Romans. Nevertheless, with occasional Roman military support, Cartimandua was maintained in power until 69 against the opposition led by her husband, Felice, and this enabled Roman governors to concentrate on Wales.
Wow. Now think about this. Okay, this was 69. So how many years after Christ, right? Christ died and was resurrected in AD 33. So this is 36 years after Christ, right? Wow. Okay, who wants to carry on? Yeah, I think
I'll finish it.
okay.
By 60 CE, much had been achieved. Suetonius Paulinus, governor from 59 to 61, was invading the island of Anglesey, the last stronghold of independence, when a serious setback occurred. This was the rebellion of Boudica, queen of the Iceni, under its king Prasutagus.
You're pretty good at that, right?
Yes.
Go ahead, I'm sorry. Go ahead, I'm sorry. The tribe of the Iceni,
Icenia, under its king Prasutagus. The tribe of the Iceni had enjoyed a position of alliance and independence. Both on his death, 60, the territory was forcibly annexed. And where am I?
An outrage has occurred. Boudica, the third line down.
Okay, outrages occurred. My computer just tripped on. Boudica was able to rally other tribes to her assistance. Chief of these were the Trinovantes of Essex, who had many grievances against the settlers of Camulodunum for their arrogant seizure of lands. Roman forces were distant and scattered, and before peace could be restored, the rebel Athenians had sacked Camulodunum, Verulamium, St. Albans, and London, the three chief centers of Romanized life in Britain. Paulinus acted harshly after his victory, but the procurator of the province, Julius Classicianus, with the revenues in mind, and perhaps also because, as a Gaul by birth, he possessed a truer vision of provincial partnership with Rome, brought about his recall. In the first 20 years of occupation, some progress had been made in spreading Roman civilization. Towns had been founded, the imperial cult had been established, and merchants were busily introducing the Britons to material benefits. It was not, however, until the Flavian periods, 69 to 96 CE, that real advances were made in this field. With the occupation of Wales by Julius Frontinus, governor from 74 to 78, and the advance into northern Scotland by troops were removed from southern Britain and self-governing habitates, administrative areas based for the most part on the indigenous tribes took over local administration. This involved a large program of urbanization and also of education, which continued into the 2nd century. Tacitus, in his biography of Agricola, emphasizes the encouragement given to it. Roman conquest of Wales was complete by 78, but Agricola's invasion of Scotland failed because shortage of manpower prevented him from completing the occupation of the whole island. Moreover, when the British garrison was reduced by elision because of continental needs, it became evident that a frontier would have to be maintained in the north. After several experiments, the Solway Tyne Isthmus was chosen, and there the Emperor Hadrian built a stone wall.
Now, I was very lucky. When I was in between my junior and senior years in college, I was able to study at Oxford for a summer. And part of the deal was we had class Monday through Thursday, so Friday through Sunday we could travel. I hopped on the train with my Britvale pass, went all around England, and I went to Hadrian's Wall. It's extreme northern England, and all it's left is about a 3-foot wall now, old crumbling stone. But it was a major deal when he built it to keep the wall like Scots out, I guess. Okay, Kathy, pick up please with condition of the province. Thank you, Ray. Good job.
There was a marked contrast in attitude toward the Roman occupation between the lowland Britons and the inhabitants of Wales and the hill country of the north. The economy of the former was that of settled agriculture, and they were largely of Belgic stock. They soon accepted and appreciated the Roman way of life. The economy of the hill dwellers was pastoral, and the urban civilization of Rome threatened their freedom of life. Although resistance in Wales was stamped out by the end of the 1st century CE, Roman influences were nevertheless weak, except in the Vale of Glamorgan. In the Pennines, until the beginning of the 3rd century, there were repeated rebellions, the more dangerous because of the threat of assistance from Free Scotland.
Go on, please.
After the Emperor Domitian had reduced the garrison in about the year 90.
Let's stop. Why do you think they had reduced the garrison around 90? What was happening in Europe?
Think they were downsizing?
Well, they weren't downsizing. They were being attacked by the Gallic and Germanic tribes who were threatening Rome, or threatening all of Julius Caesar's gains on the continent were being eroded by the rebellions. So they had to move troops back away from Britain to the continent. Okay. uprising, right, because of that. Okay. Go ahead, Kathy.
3 legions remained. Their permanent bases were established at York, Chester, and Caerleon. The legions formed the foundation of Roman military power, but they were supplemented in garrison duty by numerous smaller auxiliary regiments, both of cavalry and infantry, either 1,000 or 500 strong. These latter garrisoned the wall and were stationed in a network of other forts established for police work in Wales and northern England. With 15,000 legionaries and about 40,000 auxiliaries, the Army of Britain was very powerful. Its presence had economic as well as political results. Hadrian's Wall was the most impressive frontier work in the Roman Empire. Despite a period in the following 2 reigns when another frontier was laid out with the Glasgow-Edinburgh line, the Antonine Wall, built of turf, the Wall of Hadrian came to be the permanent frontier of Roman Britain. The northern tribes only twice succeeded in passing it, and then at moments when the garrison was fighting elsewhere. In the late Roman period, when sea raiding became prevalent, the wall lost its preeminence as a defense for the province, but it was continuously held until the end of the 4th century.
And now what year would be the end of the 4th century? What year would that be?
399 or
right. 3. Right. Because 0 to 100 is 1st century, right? No, 0 to 99, excuse me. 100 to 199 is 2nd century, right? And then et cetera, et cetera. Okay, carry on. Thanks.
But although they withdrew to Hadrian's line not later than the year 180, the Romans never abandoned interest in southern Scotland. In the 2nd century, their solution was military occupation. In the 3rd, after active campaigning, 208 to 211, by the Emperor Septimus Severus and his sons, during which permanent bases were built on the east coast of Scotland, the solution adopted by the Emperor Caracalla was regulation of relationship by treaties. These, perhaps supported by subsidies, were enforced by supervision of the whole lowlands by patrols based on forts beyond the wall. During the 4th century, more and more reliance was placed on friendly native states, and patrols were withdrawn.
Okay. Again, more reliance was placed on friendly native states because they have to keep on withdrawing troops from Britain to bring them back to Europe to help defend Rome. Okay, Ray, pick up, please.
Okay. Britain was an imperial province. The governor represented the emperor, exercising supreme military as well as civil jurisdiction. As commander of 3 legions, he was a senior general of consular rank. From the late 1st century, he was assisted on the legal side by legatus juridicus. The finances were in the hands of a provincial procurator, an independent official of equestrian status whose staff supervised imperial domains and the revenues of mines in addition to normal taxation. In the early 3rd century, Britain was divided into 2 provinces in order to reduce the power of its governor to rebel. As Albinus had done in 196, Britannia Superior had its capital at London and a consular governor in control of 2 legions and a few auxiliaries. Britannia Superior, with its capital at York, was under a Praetorian governor with 1 legion but many more auxiliaries.
Stop for a second. Hold on a minute. You know, there's still a division in Britain. You know, there are actually two archbishops in Britain, right? There's the Archbishop of Canterbury and one at York. You don't hear about the guy at York very much, but York and Canterbury have always been rivals. Canterbury is basically London area, and York is York. And you know, they're both very powerful, but He's always been a very powerful bishop in the English church. Okay, carry on, please. So you see that this division extends back to Roman times. Isn't that fascinating? It's fascinating to me.
Yeah. Local administration was a varied character. First came the charter town. By the year 98, Lincoln and Gloucester had joined Camalodunum as Colonia. And by 237, York had become a fort. Colonia of Roman citizens enjoyed autonomy, with a constitution based on that of Republican Rome. And Roman citizens had various privileges before the law. It is likely that Verulamium was chartered as a Latin municipium, free town. In such a town, the annual magistrates were rewarded with Roman citizenship. The remainder of the provincial ranks as peregrini subjects. A military district's control was in the hands of fort prefects, responsible to legionary commanders. But by the late 1st century, local self-government, as already stated, was granted to civitas peregrina, whose number tended to increase with time. These also had republican constitutions, being controlled by elected councils and annual magistrates, and having responsibility for raising taxes and administering local justice. In the 1st century, there were also claimed kingdoms whose rulers were married to Rome. Augustus, who had his capital at Chester, is the best known, but Rome regarded this as temporary expedients, and none outlasted the Flavian period, 69 to 96.
Wow. Okay, let's roll down. And would you pick up, Kathy, at that point?
Roman society?
Yes, please.
Society, okay. Pre-Roman Celtic tribes had been ruled by kings and aristocracies. The Roman civitates remained
I think it's civitates.
Civitates remained in the hands of the rich because of the heavy expense of office. But since trade and industry now yielded increasing profits, and the old aristocracies no longer derived wealth from war, but only from large estates, it is likely that new men rose to power. Roman citizenship was now an avenue of social advancement, and it could be obtained by 25 years service in the auxiliary forces, as well as, more rarely, by direct grants. Soldiers and...
Why was Roman citizenship so prized?
Well, because they're Republicans, right?
Yeah. Why was it so considered so valuable to be a Roman citizen? Well, look, remember St. Paul used that several times, or a couple times, when he was being captured by the Romans. They went out and they were going to tie him up and beat him, and he said, "Are you going to do you dare tie a Roman citizen up and whip him without a trial?" And the captain, I'm trying to say, well, what's Roman room for captain? The centurion was afraid because he had bound a Roman citizen when he shouldn't have done it. Okay, so it gave you certain rights of Roman law and certain privileges that nobody else had. And you probably knew that, but go ahead, please.
Soldiers and traders from other parts of the empire significantly enhanced the cosmopolitan character of the population, as did the large number of legionaries who were already citizens, and many of whom must have settled locally. The population of Roman Britain at its peak amounted perhaps to about 2 million.
See, it was, remember, what was the rest of the world like at this point in time? It was pretty much barbaric, but Rome really had a civilization. Laws, peace, prosperity, stability, etc. Okay, you want to read on, Kathy, for a little bit?
Economy.
Yes, please.
Even before the conquest, according to the Greek geographer Strabo, Britain exported gold, silver, iron, hides, slaves, and hounds in addition to grain. A Roman gold mine is known in Wales, but its yields were not outstanding. Iron was worked in many places, but only for local needs. Silver, obtained from lead, was of more significance. But the basis of the economy was agriculture. The conquest greatly stimulated production because of the requirements of the army. According to Tacitus, grain to feed the troops was levied as a tax. Correspondingly, more had to be grown before a profit could be made. The pastorals in Wales and the north probably had to supply leather, which the Roman army needed in quantity for tents, boots, uniforms, and shields. A military tannery is known at Cataract. A profit could nonetheless be won from the land because of the increasing demand from the towns. At the same time, the development of a system of large estates, villas, relieved the ancient Celtic farming system of the necessity of shouldering the whole burden. Small peasant farmers tended to till the lighter, less productive, more easily worked soils. Villa estates were established on heavier, richer soils, sometimes on land recently won by forced clearance, itself a result of the enormous new demand for building timber from the army, from new towns, and for fuel from domestic heating and for public baths. The villa owners had access to precepts of classical farming manuals and also to the improved equipment made available by Roman technology. Their growing prosperity is vouched for by excavation. There are few villas that did not increase in size and luxury, as corridors and wings were added, or mosaics and bath blocks provided. At least by the 3rd century, some landowners were finding great profit in wool. Diocletian's price edict, 301 CE, shows that at least 2 British cloth products had won an empire-wide reputation. Archaeological evidence indicates that the Cotswold district was one of the centers of this industry.
So Cotswold is the name of a type of cloth, right? Right. So, the Romans really helped Britain a lot to be quite prosperous in the Rome. Okay, so read on, or want Ray to go?
Can Ray go?
Yeah, go ahead, Ray.
Let me get a sip of water.
Sure.
Where do I start from?
We're on page 24, and trade and imported luxury goods.
Yeah.
We're waiting for Kathy to rejoin us.
Okay.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay.
Trade in imported luxury goods ranging from wine to tableware and bronze trinkets vastly increased as traders swamped in behind the army to exploit new markets. The profits of developing industries went similarly at first to foreign capitalists. This is clearly seen in the exploitation of silver, lead, and even in the pottery industry. The Mendip lead field was being worked under military control as early as the year 49. But under Nero, 54 to 68, both there and in Flintshire, and not much later also in the Derbyshire lead field, freedmen, the representatives of Roman capital, were at work. By Vespasian's reign, 69 to 79, organized companies, societies, of prospectors are attested. Roman citizens who must, in the context, be freedmen, are also found organizing the poultry industry in the late 1st century. Large profits were made by continental businessmen in the first 2 centuries, not only from such sources, but also by the import on a vast scale of high-class pottery from Gaul and the Rhineland, and on a lesser scale of glass vessels, luxury metalware, and Spanish oil and wine. A large market existed among the military, and the Britons themselves provided a second. Eventually, this adverse trade balance was rectified by the gradual capture of the market by British products. Much of the exceptional prosperity of 4th century Britain must have been due to its success in retaining available profits at home. A final important point is the role of the Roman army in the economic development of the frontier regions. The presence as consumers of large forces in northern Britain created a revolution in previous patterns of trade and civilized settlement. Cereal production was encouraged in regions where it had been rare, and large settlements grew up in which many of the inhabitants must have been retired soldiers with an interest in the land as well as in trade and industry.
And you guys know how it worked to be a legionnaire? You signed up for a single 25 or 30-year hitch, and when you survived, when you retired, you were given a plot of land and Roman citizenship if you weren't already a citizen already. Well, a lot of these farmers and later mill owners said they'd been retired soldiers. Okay? All right. Abby, you back with us?
I'm here.
Okay, so are we about towns or you want ready to read? Okay.
Oh, I can go.
Go ahead, good.
Okay. Belgic Britain had large centers of population, but not towns in the Roman sense of having not merely streets and public buildings, but also the amenities and local autonomy of a city. In Britain, these had therefore to be provided if Roman civilization and normal methods of provincial administration were to be introduced. Thus, a policy of urbanization existed in which the legions, as the nearest convenient source of architects or craftsmen, played an organizing role. The earlier towns consisted of half-timbered buildings. Before 100 CE, only public buildings seem to have been of stone. The administrative capitals had regular street grids, performed with basilica, publical, public baths, and temples. A few had theaters and amphitheaters, too. With few exceptions, they were undefended. In the 3rd century, town walls were provided, not so much as a precaution in unsettled times, but as a means of keeping operational the earthwork defenses already provided during a crisis at the end of the 2nd century. These towns grew in size to about 100 to 300 acres, with the populations of about 5,000. A few were twice this size. The majority of towns in Roman Britain seem to have developed out of trader settlements in the vicinity of early garrison ports. Those that were not selected as administrative centers remained dependent for their existence on economic factors, serving either as centers of trade or manufacture, or else as markets for the agricultural peasantry. They varied considerably in size. In the north, where garrisons were permanently established, quite large trading settlements grew up in their vicinity, and at least some of these would rank as towns.
Pretty impressive, it really is. It's 8:05. What shall we quit for the night? Maybe you want to discuss, talk about? I'm kind of anxious to get through this part and then get into more about the Celts next week, but we'll finish this from next week, and the week after that we'll get into the Celts. They're an interesting group of people, and they're looking to move into Christianity as well. But I think this gives us a very, very good background because I think one of these Britain was so stable that it had underlying everything the Roman culture at the very bottom. And what was sad though, when the Romans left, some of the methods of hygiene left as well. So, for a while, the public baths continued, and then later on during the so-called Dark Ages, it got worse. Anyway,
I'm mute.
Oh, yeah. you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, one of the things talking about that last night, I was at the service on the way home this morning. There was a PBS day on community in Great Britain. They're talking about how the practice arts women disappeared from Great Britain almost 1,000 years.
I believe it.
And it resurfaced, ironically, so I think it's in late 1700s.
I believe it. I mean, now,
Yeah.
you know.
And basically it's a loss. It's really lost. The idea of swimming. We talked about the past. And one of the professors was talking, said jokingly, that they refer to it as the 1,000 years without back in Britain.
Pretty much.
Yeah, and it brought that up.
During my summer in Britain in '75, we actually crawled through some ancient Roman sewers at York. Because Romans had regular sewers,
Right.
piping aqueducts and public baths. And it was civilized life. And that, when they left, they got kind of bad. Got dirty. That's
Yeah.
bad.
And no incense.
Yes, I know. Anyway, guys, if you want to pick up a good book, I would recommend it. For a really good read. It's done in novel form. It's called Sarah, S-A-R-U-M. You will really enjoy it. It's a big, thick book, but it is fascinating. It starts off from the pre-Roman times to Roman times to on up to the Reformation.
Now,
It is well worth your time.
when
Don't get
did
a big book and read quickly.
when did we get into Paul tracing through?
Yeah. Right after the Celtic period, well, actually, Paul was supposedly there around, I think it was 36, no, not 37. I need to look it up.
Yeah.
It was early 40s, maybe 50s when he came by. So that's what we're talking about, the ancient Celtic church.
Didn't St. Augustine precede him in Great Britain?
St. Augustine was after Paul.
After Paul, okay.
Yeah, Paul made a missionary journey, and that's where they think Christianity got root in Britain. But St. Augustine came after that.
Okay, all right. I knew it was one or the other.
Well, St. Augustine actually was part of the mission sent to evangelize pagan Rome, pagan Britain, Pope Gregory, and that's he landed in a friendly place where the Queen was a Christian, and she convinced her pagan husband to go to her chapel and allow the missionaries to come in. And that was a complete ceremony in Canterbury. But we shall talk about that later.
Right.
I'll just give you some background right now. Guys, I really appreciate you coming tonight. And actually get a few more next week. I know we're just reading stuff, but this is interesting, basic, very fascinating stuff. So, anything else you want to talk about? I want to chat about theology or anything? Or
Yeah, Father,
grateful?
Sarah, right?
Yes, sir. S-A-R-U-M.
Everyone Rutherford.
Correct. You will really enjoy that book. Donnie Stevens gave me a copy of it a couple of years ago before she helped with Sal before her brother died. And it is well worth your time. Yes, sir. What?
Father, hang on. Keep talking. I'm doing some experimenting here. Don't keep going. I need to put a plug in.
Yeah. See, so you know the myth about why Britain was evacuated, right? Gregory saw a bunch of American slave poverty story. And he all just they must be dangerous. And actually there were angles, you know, and he goes, oh, they must be saved from a year of the wrath of God, and they were from IRA, Ireland, fascinating. all the theology right now, but I want to do something short for a while. I thought we might all benefit mutually from the Celtic study. We didn't do that. Because, you know, these don't know history. It's sad because they are taught history. It's not religious history anyway. Right? Maybe we don't still need to comment or what?
No, we're good. Yeah, thanks, Father. All right, we'll be talking soon. Y'all take care.
Testing. 1, 2, 3. Testing. 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing, testing. Testing. 1, 2, 3. Testing. 1, 2, 3. Testing. 1, 2, 3. Microphone test.